All right, guys, now we're going to talk about how to share your story. Your story is unique. No one else has a story like you. And I want to help you unpack that story, bring clarity to it in a way that you can share it in 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or obviously an extended version of it. Now, one time I had a leader come up to me and he says, "Hey, tell me your testimony." And I grew up in and around the church. I never had a crazy testimony where I went wild. So I kind of told him, I was like, "Hey, I don't really have a testimony." And this leader on the spot, he just corrected me. He says, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Have you been saved from hell? Like, have you been saved from darkness?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, sorry. I definitely, okay, I have a testimony. It's just not like a crazy one, you know?" And I think sometimes we discount our stories because it's not like that story over there or that story over there. When really it's, man, we have a testimony and many testimonies of what God's done in our lives. And so we don't want to believe the lie that we don't have a testimony. And so I want to lay out for you a few biblical examples of people whose lives have been changed and stories that were used in the scriptures. And then from there, I want to give you 3 parts that you're going to actually write down your own story to help you communicate it better, okay? So the first scripture I want to walk through is Mark chapter 5. And this is where Jesus was with his disciples. He crossed over the lake, and there was a demoniac that was there. And this demoniac had potentially over 1,000 demons in him. And he's called a legion, right? A legion of demons. And he was crazy and wild and violent and dangerous. And the people in that area were freaked out of him. And Jesus comes and delivers him from this demonic oppression. And then all of a sudden, he's standing there in his right mind, totally normal. And the people there are so freaked out that they're like, "Jesus, you got to leave." And so Jesus actually leaves. And as Jesus is leaving, it's an interesting story. The guy who was a former demoniac says, "Hey, Jesus, I want to come with you. I want to go with you." And Jesus, instead of saying yes, he goes, "No, actually, I want you to stay, and I want you to go through this region and tell what the Lord has done in your life." And so what does this man do? This man goes through the region of Decapolis, which is around 10 different towns, and he was telling his story all throughout that region. And what you find later in the Gospels is Jesus comes back to this region, and this is where he feeds the thousands, and there's large crowds. And it doesn't say directly in Scripture, but it's very possible that this man's story led to the impact and prepared a way for Jesus when he came back later. So what a powerful story, right? Another story in John chapter 4 was Jesus when he was tired. He sat by a well and he was thirsty. And there was a woman, a Samaritan woman, who came and was getting her own water. And at this time, there was a racial conflict between the Samaritans and the Jews. But Jesus didn't care. And he said, "Hey, can I get a cup of water?" They have this whole conversation. He asked her about her husband. She says she doesn't have one. And then he has a prophetic word for her, and he says, "That's true." He's like, "You've actually had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with right now is not even your husband." And she's like, "Whoa, like, who are you?" And she has this whole encounter with Jesus, and then she runs back to her town and says, "Come meet a man that told me everything I ever did," you know? And this town comes and meets Jesus, and then they declare, "We not only believe just because of what you said, we've experienced him ourselves." And so we see with these 2 different biblical examples that both of these guys were not trained in a Bible college or something, although that's not bad, but they were not well trained. You would even argue both maybe were not well educated. They definitely did not have good reputations in their region. And yet God picked these 2 as examples of ones that used their story to lead whole towns to Jesus. And that's how powerful our stories are, right? And there's other examples of guys like Peter, who it wasn't like a one moment with Jesus, but it was kind of periodic, where he had different encounters that marked his life with God. And then he denied Jesus, and then he had another encounter with God. Like, some of our stories are a little bit more roller coaster like that too. And that's okay as well. It doesn't have to be this black and white moment. But I want to encourage you, our stories are powerful, okay? So those are 3 different biblical examples from Scripture. So now for you, I want you to help identify 3 different categories in your story, all right? So number 1 is, what was your life like before Jesus, right? So your BC days, right? And this could be before Jesus, like, you weren't saved, or this could be before Jesus came and delivered you in a particular category of your life, even if you were saved, right? You could have had, I was saved, but I had a lot of fear, and then God delivered me from fear, you know? So just, what was your life like before Jesus came into that area or came into your life? Okay, that's number 1. And really write that out on paper. Number two is, what was the turning point in your life or in that area of your life, right? You're like, man, had this addiction, I had this going on in my life, this struggle, but God, right? The turning point. This is where it started to shift, or this is where it began to change. And it could even be a moment or a longer period of time, but there was some turning that took place. So write down what that moment was like or what that season was like. And then third is, what is your life like now after Christ, right? After you were saved or after he saved you from that particular area of your life, right? And you'd be like, man, I used to have this addiction to pornography or to alcohol, or I was fearful or I was passive, whatever it might be. This moment happened or this season happened, and now, man, God's delivered me of fear of what other people think of me. And God's delivered me from passivity. God's delivered me from pornography. And man, it's been amazing. Like, I'm walking in purity and freedom now. This is what this is what I want you to do for your story, is write down each one of those 3 stages. And then what I want you to do is, before you go to the next video, is I want you to practice actually communicating this out loud. So you can get voice memos on your phone. If that helps you, you can record yourself. You can do it in front of a mirror. It's better if you could do this with a buddy, but some of you guys are watching this on your own. But I want to encourage you, verbalize it out loud. Right? The more you verbalize, the more you practice, the more, the first time will sound choppy, right? Second time will sound a little better. Third time, instead of it being 20 minutes, now it's 2 minutes, right? I want you to learn to share your story in 2 minutes or less if you can. Because if you can do that, then you can communicate to a lot of different people, okay? So go ahead, those 3 different areas, before Jesus, turning point, after Jesus, write those down and then do some practice. Then you can go to the next video.